All right, so everybody, episode 2. Sam, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Chris?
I'm doing pretty good. This is really exciting. Welcome to the Samwise Yaboinski podcast. Welcome, everybody. Sam, I just want to say that service yesterday was super awesome.
It was awesome. It was so well attended. There were so many people. I absolutely loved it. Everyone seemed so happy just to be together again.
Yeah, those have been really fun. And a lot of people have asked if we're able to keep doing those off into the future. And we're going to do our best. I'm imagining us out there with hats and parkas, and we're going to figure it out.
And a fire pit.
Now,
will a town allow a fire pit on the town green?
I know. We'll see.
Okay.
We'll do our best. They're being put. But we have such a great guest this week, and she has such an incredible story. So Eloise McGaw is with us, and she's the chair of the Committee on Ministry and has known many of you for many, many years, and many of you are going to meet her for the first time here in the pod. But it is super fascinating, the story of her kind of journey and spiritual leadership and how she's come to be with us. So yeah, enjoy.
I, as some people already know, grew up Roman Catholic, and I came from an interreligious family in the sense that my father was a Congregationalist and my mother was a very devout Roman Catholic. And when I married Bob, whom most of you, I hope, know, my sweet husband, in 1971, we're coming upon our 50th wedding anniversary. So
wow,
we have survived all this.
Oh,
so
wow.
that's all good. And when I told his parents about he told his parents about us getting married, they were not happy with me being a Yankee from Connecticut, Bob being a Southern Baptist from North Carolina. But they were mainly upset about my being Catholic. We assumed, both of us, that would change over time. Unfortunately, it didn't. But it did help me to realize in the end how important my religious affiliation was with Christianity and with, at the time, the Catholic Church. I had always thought that I would follow my mother's footsteps in a way in her commitment to social justice and the Catholic Church, and wanted to pursue work in ministry. And I went through ups and downs during my high school and college time, where, as everyone does, they go through interest in their faith and then disinterest and more interest in boys, and in my case, and and I even thought of being a nun at one point until I found out that celibacy was involved, and I thought that's not going to work.
Read down the list of rules, and
and I think obedience would have been a hard thing for me as well, because you have to take chastity and obedience pretty seriously. In any case, I won't go through all the details of my journey, except to say that I decided I would continue my quest for finding a place in the Catholic Church that would work. And I went to Catholic University to get my master's in religious education, thinking that although I couldn't become a priest, I could find some avenue to serve. And Bob was a good sport about that, I must say. And the thing that really struck us during my process of going to get my master's was that I would come home and he and I would talk about what I'd learned. And I took courses in world religions. I had to take some courses in Roman Catholic theology, but I also learned a lot about liberation theology and Gutierrez. And this was the Catholic Church that my mother had introduced me to, which was one that did not bind you to the rules and regulations, except it did bind you to trying to do the right thing and follow the path that she felt Jesus had shown us. So that's where Bob and I ended up, where we talked about that and how if we were going to find a common church, it had to be one that social justice was a major theme and core value for us. So I did get my master's, and soon after that, my son was born, Bridger, who some people know, but he's 47 years old now, so I guess he's grown up.
I think technically,
Chris. So anyway, we moved to Boston. We'd been living in D.C., and we moved to Belmont. And after some church searching, we ended up at the Paulus Center, which is a Catholic church in Boston, where the marginalized, it used to be advertised itself as where the marginalized were welcome. And that included people like us who were unsure of what we felt about the Catholic Church, as well as gay and lesbian and divorced Catholics. And so it was a great haven, and we felt welcome there. And we felt so welcome that Bob was even on liturgy committees with me.
Wow.
And
Really?
yeah, and he even gave out communion. I don't think anybody knew he wasn't a Catholic, though.
Oh, that's funny.
He didn't hide it, but we were very involved, and so the upshot of that was that they invited me at one point. This is by way of frame of reference in the early '80s. They invited me to participate in a Sunday preaching the gospel, which was really scary. First of all, the church was very active, and the services, there were 5 services, and they were pretty much filled each time.
Wow.
So we really did have a niche, I think that's the right term, operation going on. And I preached. I remember clearly that day because I was terrified. The reason being, I had no models of a non-celibate woman up thinking that she had something to say.
Wow.
And in grappling with that, I had to figure out what I did want to say and what did the gospel, because you preached what was in the gospel, what did it say to me? And that started a journey of really exploration of language. And, sometimes when you preach and you're told that you have to preach that particular gospel, it means nothing to you. And so I felt very strongly that whatever I said had to be authentic from me. And if it didn't mean anything to me, then it wasn't going to mean anything to anybody else. And I wasn't going to use all the afterlife jargon and that kind of stuff. So anyway, after my first episode of preaching, they invited me to join the staff and be a part of the workings of the church in a more formal way. And I did do that. And I continued every couple of months to preach. And I was in charge of some of the support groups, including interfaith couples, which again was a chance for me to think about language and think about how do we talk about the holy in language that means something to a Jewish person who's marrying a Christian person. And, what is the language that really means something to you? And we spent a lot of time on that in this couples group, which I did for the whole time that I was there. Wow. And anyway, this is a long-winded
No.
way.
And let me just ask one background question. So this still had that same identity of like a Catholic congregation that was open to queer people and divorced people and folks who at the time and still now probably would have a harder time finding a place in, just any Catholic church. I mean, there's still a real spectrum of Catholic communities even now. Yeah. But then was this like the only place that was talking about that?
No, I think there were a couple of others. There was another place, I don't remember, in Boston that was like that. But this particular church was run by the Paulist Fathers, which is a priesthood that is not managed by the diocese. They have their own, or it's like the Jesuits, but this is the Paulist. And even though they reported into the diocese, they had a lot more independence than a diocesan priest would.
Gotcha.
And so I think that's why we got away with a lot of this. Also, there was a Cardinal Medeiros was the cardinal, and he really ignored us.
Yeah.
So
like in a good supportive way, or
it just ignored us. And so that's what you wanted. You wanted to be ignored. And we also welcomed women's voices and tried to use inclusive language within the service itself. Whenever possible. So,
this is so, I love this. And one other sort of background. So when you're sort of stepping into this form of ministry, is there any part of you thinking that the apparatus of the Catholic Church might change and you might be welcomed into some sort of formal, not priesthood necessarily, but sort of, did you think the system would change, or were you sort of loving this one particular place and time? Do you know?
I think a part of me hoped that it would change. My mother kept saying it was going to change, and she saw me and my role in this church as the hope that it was going to change. But every step forward felt like a step back by the institution. And what was often difficult in preaching for all of us at that church was when certain things would come out from the Roman Catholic Church, and we would try to avoid sometimes even talking about it because there was no way to defend it. The irony about the things like the support groups that I was asked to run, one of them was the gay and lesbian group, and the group that were gay and lesbian, they were a very confidential group. We did not advertise that we had that group. And because we didn't want to get in trouble with the archdiocese. Wow. But that started to change because we started to feel a sense of freedom. And they came and asked me if I would be their minister, because you had to have a minister affiliated with any group, that a minister meaning a ministerial staff member. And I honestly, and our congregation will laugh at this, I'm sure, I didn't really understand at all what a gay and lesbian person experienced or what their lives were like. And I was really limited. And so I was honest with them about it. I said, I have no real understanding of the issues, and I'm happy to do this as long as we have your confidentiality has to be honored, so I will not come to meetings.
Okay.
And because I didn't feel it was any of my business who was a part of that group.
Yeah.
And secondly, you need to tell me if I'm not representing the needs when I'm of that part of the community when I'm preaching.
Yeah.
Because I knew how to represent the needs of women.
Yeah.
But I did not know how to represent the needs of lesbians and gay people in the community. And so they were really helpful in that respect. And supportive when I would make sure that I included them when when you preached, included naming who our community is. So I was learning all the time from this. And I was pretty young. I was in my 30s. And so I was always grateful for that educational process for myself. And so I guess the real question is what happened and why did I end up where I am? And what happened was that and those members of our church who are from the Catholic part, a Catholic background will understand this. Good Friday is one of the holiest days of the Catholic year, and it is also a year, the one day that they have Mass. They have a communion service so that the bread and wine has been blessed the night before on Holy Thursday, and that bread and wine is what is used at Good Friday. I just say that as background.
Yeah.
And I was asked to preach on Good Friday, which is a time that the lay people could lead the service because it's not a mass. Right. And and so I was very honored by that, and very scared, because I was always scared when I got in front of people.
And let's remind. So you said there's 5 services, and how many people were in the room?
Yes, there usually are 5 services, but for Good Friday there is the midday service, and I think there was an evening service as well. Wow. It was a while ago, but I am pretty sure we did both. And the midday service, because this church is in the middle of Boston, attracted all the business people, and everybody liked to go to the Good Friday service. So there was that aspect. So there was standing room only at that service. Wow. And that was scary. But anyway, I did the service. I had a lot of support from the other staff members and from the congregation. Because like we have at First Church, we had a worship committee that participated and helped and supported you and gave you ideas. And it was a good service. And afterwards, I felt that people had a different experience of my own message about Good Friday. And then we had Easter. And then on the Monday after Easter, the head of the center came in to see me, and I thought he was going to give me great feedback about what I thought was a great experience. But he came in to let me know that Cardinal Law, Bernard Law, who now was the cardinal in the Boston area and Massachusetts, he had apparently had some people come to the service and were very upset that a woman had led the service, a non-ordained person, which... and that there were a lot of things that they did not like about what was going on at the Paulus Center, and it had to stop, including allowing women to preach the gospel. And so that kind of threw me for a loop. I wasn't prepared for that.
Yeah.
And the Paulus were told that if they didn't, follow the rules, they were going to be... The phrase was their faculties would be taken away, which actually means that they would close the center down.
Wow.
So that's what happened. And it's interesting in retrospect. The priests were very concerned about me and about the fact that I might walk out and not, but I didn't. And we grappled with it all quietly for a while, and then somehow the press got a hold of it, and we knew that we had to go public and let them know what exactly we were being told that we had to change, including some of the language. And it's interesting. One of the things that we did at communion, when you're about to give out communion, the priest would say, "All are welcome."
Wow.
And we all know now that all are not welcome, because that language had to change.
Yeah.
We didn't change that language, by the way, there, as far as I know. At least we didn't during the period that I stayed. And I did insist that I tell the community what was going on, because at the time I felt that I felt like I was obligated to stay and help them move through this awful thing. And I did. I stayed, and I stayed for a year. I tried really hard.
Wow.
The priests took over preaching the gospel. The lay people, me and the nun, there's a nun on staff at the time, I think she was still there. We were told that we could frame, we could welcome people, and then we could do kind of a conclusion, but the priest would do the main thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which made it very difficult for me, because then once again we get to the issue around language, and his language wasn't necessarily what I was comfortable with, and so I tried, and finally, after therapy, and I had a lot of depression, I just decided it was time to move on, and I had a situation happen where I was driving home from a planning session for the service. the following Sunday, and I was very depressed, and I was on Star Drive heading to Belmont, and I suddenly saw this car coming at me toward the median, and it hit the median and turned over and went on fire. And honest to God, I can't believe this really happened. And everybody stopped, and I jumped over the median to try to help. And as we were trying to pull the person out of the car, I stepped back, and I had this, like this transference where I felt like I was the person in the car.
Wow.
And so anyway, the next day I resigned. I decided enough.
Wow.
And the one thing I forgot to mention that was pertinent to this story is that on the day that I announced to this community that women were not being permitted to preach, my children were in the congregation. They have been a member of this church for their childhood and participated in it and knew how important it was to me. And after that, my son said to me, I will not step foot in a Catholic church again. I am going to join the church down the street from us. There's a woman minister, and I can sing. And that was First Church.
Wow.
So he joined.
And had you been a part of, well, first let's have a moment. I mean, that's incredible. With seeing the person in the flaming car.
I know, that was,
which is basically, I can't fathom, I've raised Unitarian Universalists all my life, had women in leadership, was raised by an incredible, super active, really influential, really committed lay leader mother who helped run every single church that we were ever, and all of her leadership was always welcome. And so many churches basically have been run by women forever. But the blockage of saying, but only we could have 98 women running in an organization, but the only 2 guys who are going to stand up in front of people and talk, those have to be men. That has always been just so hard to fathom and so hard to grasp. But I get it. But to be able to be in that situation and still want to support it and still want to do the best that you can to help this thing flower that you've put so much time into. It's just, it's so hard to imagine that difficulty of finally letting it go and moving on after having worked so hard to build it and inch it just centimeter at a time towards progress, and then have even that taken away. That's a lot, but a real victory to have raised a boy who's saying, no, Mom.
Right.
That's right.
I will not be part of something that can't see who you are and what this is. And, that's great. So anyway, but had you been to First Church before? Because he knew that there was a women minister.
Yes. The only time that I really had been there was when I guess I'm trying to remember. Diane was still there, I think, when Bridger joined the following year. I can't remember when she left, but I think I'd been there for memorial services. Yeah. But, my mother had always said to me that the Unitarians read poetry and that's what they do in their service. And they're, I kind of thought that's pretty much what they did.
Yeah.
It was a very intellectual, she said. There's not much spirituality there. So she was very critical of the Unitarian Church when I was growing up, except that they were partners with all the social justice stuff she did. So she had to kind of let go of that a little bit. Yeah. But they didn't, their language negated Jesus more than, some of them were kind of downright, I don't want to say not Christian, but they didn't.
No, like anti-Christian.
They just didn't welcome. They made you feel like you were dumb if you were a Christian. Oh, yeah. Why are you following this? Right. And that I've always been sensitive to that, including at our own church when I first was introduced to it. Yeah.
And not just, I think there's been a whole evolutionary stages of Unitarian Universalism. And this sort of gets to one of the other things that we've been talking with everybody about is, something about the sources and the principles. And, we've always historically, we grew out of my good friend who's visiting right now came to the church for the first time. And he's like, did you buy this building from a Christian church? And I was like, no, dude, this is our church. We built it like this because we're Christian, 200 years ago, like these both Unitarians and Universalists were Christians, but then the pendulum sort of swung. And certainly by the time you're having that conversation with your mother, and by the time, my generation of Unitarian Universalism, when I was a baby coming up, it was very anti-Christian. It was very anti-theist. And we sort of existed and were really perpetuated by a moment where people were like, wait, we can have a church without God? And so people really got together around that. But then, of course, sometimes that message of then, well, okay, so what is the kind of transcendent thing connecting us, and really fertile, beautiful conversations that could happen. Sometimes it became, and then you're dumb if you believe in God, right. And then you're dumb if you have this kind of connected experience of Jesus, many of whom were coming out of, religions and experiences that didn't feed them and didn't nurture them. But I think in the last 20 years, especially, and I guess now I'm getting older, so the last 30 years especially, there's really been another evolutionary stage of Unitarian Universalism where we've really embraced a wide range of theologies, where I forget the numbers, but when you all were calling me, they did all sorts of surveys or whatever. I think we were like 30% atheist and another 20 or 30% theist of some form, and so really we have a lot of Buddhists and Jews and people with a really wide range of personal theologies, which I think is really, rich. It's one of my favorite parts of doing it. But so then, like you were saying with your Paulus Center folks, when you're having those conversations with your worship team about like, okay, well, we have Good Friday coming up, we have Easter coming up. Like, what can we say that will be engaging to this, atheist, humanist, and to this, and to Eloise, who has led Good Friday services in the past. It's a fascinating mix.
One thing I forgot to mention that I think was key to my transition to feeling I could move out of this Roman Catholic tradition was what I referred to as Women Church. That's and this was a group of women who fought for women's ordination, but also, and still does, by the way, those that are still involved, but they, through getting to know them, many whom were members of the Paulus Center, and going to their national conferences, I was introduced to a much more inclusive and expansive spirituality beyond the male-dominated Roman Catholic tradition. So we basically co-opted what we liked and what we felt met our spirit, and they introduced me to the goddess, to what they called ecofeminism. I mean, which to me was sort of before climate change, but also allowed me to learn to find the sacred in nature and the world around me in a new way, and to try to find the language to name that as holy. And that is, of course, in the woven in the principles of the UU Church, but I wasn't aware of that. In fact, I wasn't even aware of the UU principles when my son joined the First Church. And I did not, when I went to the First Church, I didn't find much spirituality there at all, to tell you the truth. And this was back for those in 1987 is when I think my son joined, and my daughter and husband went to the church more frequently than I did during this stage, because I was transitioning to trying to figure out where the heck I belonged, but I didn't want my family to leave me behind. So I think I basically followed them rather than leading them, as I had before.
And let's not lose, I mean, the transition from being a religious leader and shaping a whole community and being part of that process to then being a person in the pew of a place that theologically is fundamentally, not the best fit for you. That's a huge transition.
Yeah.
It was. And this could be a conversation for another time, but I've been reflecting on this this period. I had been reflecting just on the rejection that I felt in the Catholic Church. But my next thought process was going to be, well, how did I get to where I am in First Church? And
you should talk about it, because I think you're angling for like a subsequent. You're like, I need to be 2-pod guest, which I don't know if we're there yet. But no, tell us now, because
tell us about it.
How does that take time?
I will tell you about it, and then it might be something for another conversation, but not necessarily potted, whatever this is called.
Yeah.
But I can't remember when I signed the book, but I do remember that it was on April Fool's Day.
No,
it's funny.
And I decided that was the perfect time, because I felt
fantastic.
This didn't feel right, but it didn't feel not right, and so I'll do it. And
Wow.
and I sat in the pew, and I didn't feel comfortable at First Church, but I did it because my son and daughter were now getting involved in music, and my husband liked it. And Victor Carpenter became the minister, and I remember when he came to my house for a visit, and I was amazed because I hadn't invited him. And I was kind of struck by the way he preached. He was very emphatic. And anyway, he came and he said he had heard about me through one of his friends, who was the UU minister in Boston. And I can't remember his name, but he was very well known in the UU circles. And he had also preached at the Paulus Center when we invited lay non-Catholics to come preach.
Yeah.
And anyway, he had heard about it, and he came and he said he wondered if I would consider conducting a Good Friday service at First Church.
Wow.
And I told him that was very terrifying to me.
Wow.
And so we talked about it, and they used to have a Good Friday service, that called the 7 Last Words. Wow. And he said that not many people came, but he felt that it could use a more Christian voice and somebody who's comfortable with that language. And he felt that there were a lot of people in our community that might be interested in that.
Yeah.
And so I did it.
Wow.
And Alpha worked with me on the music, and
wow.
And we did the 7 Last Words, and I found 7 people that would do them, and then I had a reflection, and we did that the entire time that Victor was the minister, and Victor participated as a member of the community.
Yeah, that's great.
So he was kind of not the minister. He didn't take any leadership role. Yeah. Except he may have done a last word. And after the first one, I think it was that people asked if we could do a Holy Thursday service.
Oh, yeah.
So Bob and I got together, the two of us, and I got out all my women church stuff that was very inclusive. And we did a Holy Thursday service as well.
That's great.
The night before, and it was held in the parlor. Usually we had 12 people, and we had a breaking of the bread in the way that I believed could be more inclusive. We had some former Jewish members of the community who came. Yeah. So we made sure it was not a Jesus-centered thing so much. Sure. But anyway, Bob wrote a beautiful he did a great job of helping me write it so that it would be the story using the Hebrew scripture as well as the story in the New Testament. And
Well, this has been an elaborate, long way of recruiting you to do it again this year.
No. I stopped after Edmund came because Edmund was very cynical about, or appeared to be very cynical about the Jesus stuff. And I just felt uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But you know what else happened is I grew beyond it and realized that I didn't need to do this.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So so how did was that the beginning of starting to feel more at home at First Church?
Well, yeah, I think it was. And, that was the only thing I really got involved in at First Church. But I got a lot of good feedback from the people that came. A lot of people couldn't figure out why we were doing it. And that was okay too.
Well, it's not for everybody, but it
isn't for everybody. Yeah. That's right. But
that's great. I mean, that's part of what we do.
It was a good transition for me to feel I could be a part of this church.
Yeah.
Spiritually somehow.
Yeah. That's great.
Can I ask, Eloise, how much do you feel that from your background you've retained? And how much do you still value from your Catholic background? I mean, we tend to tell these you sort of transition stories as sort of radical breaks with our past, but of course we carry a lot with us, both for the worse and for the better. I wonder how much you still feel tied or connected or bound to for example, the Catholic social justice tradition you were raised in, and maybe some of the theology. Or what do you retain now?
I feel I've been freed from the shackles of Roman Catholicism. And in a way, lately, as I've been reflecting on it, I am so grateful for what happened back in 1987. Wow. Because yes, it was painful, and yes, it's been difficult, but I feel that my spiritual journey, it enriched me to be now at a place where I don't have a longing at all for Catholicism. I feel freed from it. I have a love for what I learned from the rituals there. For example, the breaking of the bread was one of my most favorite rituals, the communion, but we translated that into what does it mean to break bread around the table when you have friends over.
Yeah.
And as everyone knows, when they come to our house, we always start with a prayer. We don't care who you are. But we
like
feel
the FedEx
that
guy comes and you're like,
yeah, if he wants to have dinner with us, because it has nothing to do with Jesus, but it has to do with, I think Jesus' message was, which said all are welcome at this table, and let's break it and share our lives together, and let's make it a good, nice time. And so in that sense, I really begun a journey that I think is deeper as a result of my departure. No, Sam, I don't have a longing to go back there. And I have a sadness for those people who feel still stuck there.
Yeah.
And I just hope that they're finding ways for it to feed them. But I think many just don't know where else to go. And others are like my mother, who just have a love for that, or had a love for that church, despite its sinfulness.
Yeah.
I am very glad that she was not alive for the pedophilia nonsense crime.
Yeah. Well, I'm very glad to have you here with us and for your leadership. And again, especially in this last year or two, the creation of the Committee on Ministry, and especially so for those of you who either are new to the church or didn't experience it the last couple of years, one of the things that Committee on Ministry has done is hosted these listening circles. And especially in the beginning of the pandemic, I mean, we hosted a bunch of these when we were just pivoting like ballerina. I mean, it felt like one thing after another was changing. So it was so incredible to be able to hear from people, many people, and have people share their experiences. So I wonder if both a little bit about what we have brewing with the Committee on Ministry this year, or other ways that people might interact with you and the rest of the group around that, and what it's been like. I know this is too many questions, but what it's been like to create it, and where you think it's going.
Yes. Well, it was challenging to create this committee because it's challenging. My friends who are listening to this, I love you all, but sometimes you can be very challenging. And no matter what you do, there's not a perfect way of doing it. And I think, are a community of many, many experts. And so the trick with the Committee on Ministry is to bring in people who are willing to devote their time on the committee to listening and to trying to elicit from you how you're doing, how the church is doing, how how we can more effectively minister to one another. It's not to find fault with ourselves. It's really to say, how do we grow? How do we continue to reach out and follow this spiritual journey together? And the spiritual journey includes a lot of action items as well. But I think we want to make sure that we continue to feed the spiritual needs of our community so that gives them the energy to do all the good things that we do. So I have a great committee, and we have a 3-year term. And the reason for that is that all of us play a role in what I just described, listening to one another and hearing one another. But to give you a chance to be in a leadership position to do this, it is a little bit more of a core responsibility. So we will rotate it so that maybe in 15 or 20 years, many, many people will have had the opportunity to get to know the community in this way and share it so that we, the minister and the staff, are hearing from us in a more formal way how we're doing. Does that help?
No, it's super helpful. And I, always, really all of the staff, but I will speak for myself, I'm always happy to hear from people, direct feedback people can share with me. And a lot of people do. It's great, for good, when people enjoy stuff, but also when people have constructive criticism about stuff. We're really excited to hear from that. And I know that's not the case with all ministers and all ministries, but we're, this is a supple organization, and all 9 of us on staff are really, really happy to incorporate people's feedback. And, we exist to help the church serve people in the world. And so we're always excited to hear about it. But this is another great way where people can talk to. In between our monthly meetings, each of the Committee on Ministry people is sort of charged and encouraged to go out and chat with at least one person they don't know and just sort of check in loosely about their experience of the church. And, especially right now, one of the fascinating things about this moment is we have so many different things happening where somebody's never been to one of these great outdoor services we've done, and somebody's never clicked on one of these great videos we've been doing. And that's totally fine, but it's super helpful to hear from people and sort of hear about their experience of the church. So I guess the last thing is, do you have, Eloise, any questions for either Sam or I?
Well, do you think that my journey resonates with anyone within our church? Or
oh my God.
I think it does. I mean, first of all, we all know quite a few former Catholics, ex-Catholics in the congregation who have not the same story as you, but similar stories. I'm actually just going to mention, I wasn't raised Catholic, but my ex-wife was raised Catholic, and her sort of struggle for years within the church was quite similar to yours in a way. And I sort of came to the conclusion that these 2 peculiar things about the Catholic Church: A, this deep social justice tradition in the church, and B, the way in which sort of liberal or left-leaning or dissident Catholics will often for years try and cling to the institution and reform it from the inside, even when that seems desperate. I think these 2 things are connected. Does that resonate with you? Because for my ex, I mean, she just really believed that the church was a force for good across the world, which in many parts of the world and in many respects it is. And she wanted to be a part of that, and she wanted to change the institution for the better rather than rather than defect. And I hear some of that in your story. But I wonder if that resonates with you.
Yes, but enough was enough for me.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I still have people I love who are still involved in the church, including the priests that were there when I left.
Yeah.
And they're good people, and it's not their fault this happened. And
Yeah.
but they're still devoted to it, and that's fine. I am without judgment on that, but I hope they don't see a car coming at them and feel they're stuck in a fire that they can't get out of, like I did. But I
so appreciate, and I think so. Having served a bunch of different churches in a bunch of different places, one of the interesting things about New England is there's so many former Catholics in our Unitarian Universalist churches. So I think without question, your story and so much of your story resonates with so many of our folks. I think people stay with the Catholic Church for so many different reasons, really deep connections with family. I think some people are spiritually lazy and they're like, well, this is fine. It's just as bad as any other church. I think there's a lot of reasons. But finding a place, even without Catholicism, I think there's something like the vast majority of our folks, it's a small group of us who have been Unitarian Universalist our whole lives. So for either people who are coming out of other congregations and other backgrounds, or especially bizarre and difficult and challenging and fascinating, people who have been raised with nothing, right? People for whom the idea of going to church on Sunday is totally out of like
me. I'm one of those people.
There's a big shift to being part of community, and there's a big shift to being part of a covenanted religious community, and asking these questions about then, okay, so if I'm not in this system that's really clearly articulating a theological framework for me, how do I create and forge and explore my own? How do I reconcile or, harvest the fruits of my theological past? And then, answer the question of then, okay, if not that, then what? Like you were saying with this women church, like what are the things that actually resonate with you now? Yeah. And then creating that and harvesting that. And, I think it's, it's a fascinating story. And
I just want to add, not to make it all about me, but when I was between churches, I actually applied for a job at the Paulist Center. I didn't get an interview. I don't think I was Catholic enough for them, but so I ended up at First Church, and I think I ended up at the right place.
Yes, you definitely
wild
did.
Connection.
That is wild.
Yeah, isn't that funny? I could have been working for them.
Yes.
They're lost on both counts, and I'm so
seriously.
grateful that
my God. Both, Sam, you'll have to tell me more about that sometime. I'd love to hear
hilarious.
about
that. Well, and so thank you so much for everything, but especially for being our very second guest.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eloise. This is a great conversation.
Really exciting. So, all right, we'll see you soon. Thanks for coming on.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, Eloise. Bye-bye.
Yep, bye.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
I love that story.
Yeah.
But before we go, want to invite everybody, if you want to send in any questions, anything for the mailbag, you can email me, minister@uubelmont.org. That's minister@uubelmont.org. Or some of you have my longer email. That's my last name's at Gmail. Use any email you like. You can also email Sam.
Yeah.
And if you send us a question, we'll answer it here at the end of the pod. But
wait, a question about anything?
Question about anything. Yeah.
Anything.
Unitarian Universalism, life, our backstory. We're going to dig into Samwise's backstory because I'm fascinated to learn more about who he is.
My background as a hobbit.
That's right. Exactly. We have many episodes coming just about Sam. But yeah, please send us any questions. This has been really fun. We're excited to get this going. We have some great guests coming up. Both some staff members and some volunteers and some longtime members of the church. It's going to be really cool. But yeah, so thanks for the precious gift of your attention.
Yeah, thanks.
And yeah, this has been really fun. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Eloise.